Hello, this is Renee Hahn with William Ravis Real Estate, and this is a series where I tackle some of the more common questions that come up in real estate and give you real answers. So today what I wanted to talk about is something that comes up quite a bit, particularly when it's somebody's first transaction or first sale or purchase real estate wise in Southwest Florida. As you can imagine, every state, sometimes even at county levels, have different types of purchase agreements. And it's really important, even if you've done a ton of real estate transactions in the past, it's really important for you to understand what the contract options are in the area where you're purchasing or selling real estate. And today, what I want to talk about is specific to Collier County. So, when someone wishes to purchase property in Collier County on the residential side, there's two forms of a contract. One is what I call a standard contract, and one is called an as-is. And one of the hot points that comes up where it's a potential disconnect between sellers and buyers comes with the use of an as-is contract. And so I just wanted to hit that one head on and give thoughts of consideration whether you're on the buying side or the selling side. Let me start with just a simple explanation. When you look at a standard contract versus an as-is, what I'm going to focus on today is how that inspection process is handled. With a standard contract, purchase contract, the contract lays out that the buyer has a certain number of days, typically 15, to complete their inspections. They have another 5 days to be able to work through whether it's getting quotes or thinking through the inspection findings and present their requests to the seller. So 15 days usually, another 5 days to put together your requests. Although oftentimes the buyer and seller mutually are motivated to try to get that done sooner. Not very many people will drag their feet on that, but that's what the contract allows. And then there's another 10 days that's afforded to the sellers to respond. How that process is handled is laid out in the standard inspection area of the standard contract. However, what it is intended to do is to allow a process by which the buyers can inspect. The buyers then have a format by which they can request repairs, and there are some parameters around what is considered defective and not. There's also a lot of gray area. And then it takes care of explaining what happens if the parties don't agree. And so it may be that a buyer asks for something that's cosmetic in nature and not considered contractually defective. Well, if the seller says no, the buyer doesn't necessarily have recourse to be able to walk away, terminate the contract, and get their deposit back. However, if a buyer asks for something that is considered within the contractual confines as defective and the seller refuses to do it, the buyer may choose to either move forward knowing that the seller's not doing anything, or they may terminate, and in the process of terminating, they may have rights to get their deposit money back. So the point is, in a standard contract, it affords that process by which there is a inspection, there is an option to request, there is a response by the seller, etc. The as-is, on the other hand, states that the buyer has the opportunity to do their due diligence and do their inspections, but it does not lay out a process by which the parties can work on trying to remedy anything that comes up. This is where things kind of fall off the track. An as-is contract within the contract specifies that the buyer is knowingly purchasing the property in as-is condition. Now, again, they're afforded their due diligence period, which is specified in the contract. It's a fill in the blanks, and so it's maybe typically the 15-day period like the standard. Sometimes buyers will accelerate that and maybe do a 10-day or a 12-day. But that 10, 12, 15-day, whatever that period is, that due diligence period, is for the buyer to be able to know the condition of the property beyond what the seller's disclosed and make decisions on whether they want to move forward or not. Where the disconnect comes into play, a lot of times sellers will get an as-is contract and they're like, wow, that sounds very attractive. I know what we're agreeing to on purchase price, and I'm not going to be asked to perform any repairs. So my costs are known to me. This is where the challenge begins. Yes, that is how the contract reads. And one may argue that that is exactly how the contract was intended to be used. However, more and more what we're seeing is that buyers will put their offer on an as-is as a way to give them that due diligence period to walk away for any reason without explanation, and that's a benefit to them. They are under a contract, but they have an easy release from that contract. And sellers, by the way, understand that. Where it comes off the track a little bit is within that due diligence period. If the buyers are good at getting their inspections done early enough to where they know the outcomes of that and still have time between completing the inspections and their end of their due diligence period, they may actually approach the seller and open up a discussion that says, look, we have the right to terminate. We've learned some things about your property in this due diligence process, and we would like to ask you to do X, Y, and Z. Now, again, that timeline is not there as it is, or the guidelines on how to negotiate that as the standard contract. So the only thing that is clear, I should say, the only thing that is concrete is that due diligence period. So the buyer can ask for those things, and if they have not heard back from the seller by the deadline, they must make a decision. The seller has not responded. They may not have either agreed or disagreed to doing the repairs. But once that termination date is gone, they no longer have any recourse. So this is really important. So let me start with the buyer side. Buyers, if you're going to use the as-is contract to be able to have a little bit of have your cake and eat it too, because you want to get out for any reason, but you also want to ask for things, you must make sure that you know when your due diligence period is up, and you may be forced to make decisions about proceeding with the contract or terminating before you have any response from the seller. It's just the way the process works. Sellers, what you must know is that if your buyers are educated and their agent has done a good job of explaining the difference in the contracts, even when you accept an as-is contract, you may still be asked to do things in order for that buyer to proceed with fixing your property. What you need to know is that deadline as well. You need to understand that if you say no, which is completely within your rights, because again, it's on an as-is contract, nobody is going to require you to make any changes. You need to know the offsets and the outcomes of your response and how that may potentially affect the deal. For example, if you decline that buyer's request within that termination period, if it's something that's really important to them and is a deal breaker for them, they may walk, and in that case, they get their deposit back because, again, they have terminated the contract within their termination period. If you agree to those, they may proceed. It's a little bit of a gamble on both sides of this, and I'll give you an example. We recently had a listing, and the buyers did it on an as-is contract. The seller said, you know what, I probably wanted a little bit more for my home, but given that it's being purchased in as-is condition, I'm okay, I will accept that offer. The buyer waited until the very last moment to submit any inspection request, and it just so happened to be teetering outside of their window. The termination window. The seller came back and said, no, thank you. I'm not interested in making any of those repairs. And of course, the buyer was really disappointed, probably frustrated, because they were repairs they felt should be needed to make. But that buyer has a choice. Their choice could have been to terminate or move forward. It's a binary choice. They chose to move forward because they had waited too long. And if they had chosen to walk away when the sellers responded with not approving those inspection repairs, they would have lost their deposit. So again, it's important that people know that just because it's on an as-is contract does not necessarily mean that that buyer is intending to purchase it in as-is condition. They may be intending to come back and ask for things, and they may be willing to walk away from the property if the seller does not make those repairs. That deadline is so important to both parties and must be watched. So I just wanted to share it. It's an area that I think poses the opportunity to have a disgruntled party on one or both sides of that. I know for sellers, it can be kind of frustrating because when these as-is contracts come in, you don't know the intent of the buyer. And by the way, the buyer's intent may change based on what they learn about the home. So when you accept an as-is contract, you have to accept that they may indeed come back and ask for repairs. You under no circumstances are required to make those repairs, but you need to understand the consequences if you have denied those repairs within their due diligence period. They do have the right to walk with their funds, their earnest deposit back in hand. Buyers, you need to know that sellers are not obligated to do anything that you've asked them to. And in particular, if you do not stick to your timelines, you could be in a situation where you still have to move forward with the purchase of the house without having any repairs done by the seller. The best thing you can do is to look before you are ready to make an offer, buyers, or before you are ready to accept an offer, sellers. Go through both contracts with your agent to make sure you're fully informed, you know all the possible scenarios that could happen and the respective outcomes. This is Renee Hahn with William Ravis Real Estate, and I hope this was a helpful segment and helping prepare you to buy or sell your home.